Football just wasn't my thing.
Wait, I'm sorry. You are like one of the top running backs ever.
Lots of reaction to this video.
I was forced to play football.
5 Pro Bowls, won a rushing title, and the 4th leading rusher in history.
No, you laughing, but this is the truth. I always thought that I would die before I was 21. A guy had a gun in my head, pulled the trigger 7 times. This is a true story. My mother comes running in my room and I hear glass breaking and pounding. I hear, I'm gonna break this door down and I'm gonna come in there and kill you.
In 1999, he won the team MVP.
I just heard everyone saying, if that happened to me, I would go crazy. I would lose my mind. At 4 years old, I just remember thinking like, I have to take this knife and stab him in the chest.
Let's talk about a guy who did everything right. That's Curtis Smart.
I just remember thinking, I'm not gonna be able to save my mother's life.
No NFL running back ran for more yards.
I'm running down there with like everything that I had to try to get there before he busts through the door. I had escaped death so much by that time.
This is some clutch moves.
By this time, the police come out.
Touchdown.
Done a lot of things that I'm not proud of.
What stopped you that night from killing your father?
My mother comes running in my room and I hear glass breaking and pounding. I hear my dad yelling, if you don't get my son out here in 10 seconds, I'm gonna break this door down and I'm gonna come in there and kill you. She's trying to get me dressed and she's just screaming and rushing. I'll never forget, she sends me out of the back door. At 4 years old, I just remember thinking like, I'm not gonna be able to save my mother's life. I'm running down there with like everything that I had to try to get there before he busts through the door. He grabs me and by this time the police come out and he's just running with me over his shoulder. They had their guns drawn, trying to make sure that he didn't harm me. Back then, it wasn't like it is today. He could get out of jail and he'd come right back the next day and abuse her some more. I remember at 5 years old, looking at him in the bedroom while he was sleeping, thinking to myself, like, I have to take this knife and put it, and like, I have to stab him in the chest. I'm gonna break this door down, I'm gonna come in there and kill you. I'm not gonna be able to save my mother's life. Save my mother's life. The only thing that I believe stopped me from attempting it was that I didn't think I was strong enough to push a knife through my father's chest. If I did that and it didn't work, I always thought that he would take it out on my mother. My parents ended up separating when I was 6 years old. And even though my father was gone, it was like the problem was still there. She just became angrier and even more bitter. We were so poor that we couldn't afford a babysitter. And I lived in a project environment, but it was very dangerous. My mother taught me how to walk home from school, which was maybe 1.5 miles away.
He had to stay in the house till I got home to feed him and go to another job.
She was afraid that someone would discover that I was unattended all this time at 5 and 6 years old and CYS would take me away from her. She had this little key that she would put around my neck with a shoestring. I would just sit in the window because I was petrified to be in the house by myself. This window became my TV. By the time I was 7, on my way home, I would start carrying groceries, or I would knock on a person's door and ask could I shovel their snow or rake their leaves. And every day I got home, I had somewhere between $2 and $5, and I would give it to my mother and say, pay for the babysitter for the next couple of days. My grandmother, she stepped in and she became like a wonderful second parent to me. Unfortunately, on St. Patrick's Day in 1982, we found my grandmother lying in the bed murdered with a knife in her chest. Someone had robbed her for $140. I just heard everyone saying, you know, if that happened to me, I would go crazy. I would lose my mind. In my mind as a 9-year-old, my mother told me the only thing that got her through that was that I came up to her and I grabbed her hand and I said, Mom, are you going crazy? And she said, looked down at me and said, no. Why you ask me that? And I just said, well, that's good, because if you go crazy, nobody's going to be here to take care of me. I had escaped death so much by that time that I was 20 years old. And I always thought that I would die before I was 21. I always had this reoccurring nightmare that I would get killed before I was 21. And by this time, I'm a full-fledged product of my environment. Done a lot of things that I'm not proud of. My mother comes to me and she says, Kurt, listen, I want you to do something after school. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be football, baseball, basketball. Just do something so you're not in this neighborhood 24 hours a day, just to take up 2 extra hours of your time. She said, because if something happens to you, they might as well kill me too, because you're the only thing that I'm living for.
I gave him a month and a half. I didn't care what it was. He wouldn't try it out for football. And this is what happened.
The first time they pitched me the ball, I ran an 80-yard touchdown. It was a place that I felt safe. I didn't worry about any outside problems. I was never really exposed to too much that was positive. I think sometimes when you grow up in an environment like that, you don't dream but so far. Sometimes your dreams are smothered by your circumstances, and I was one of those people.
The New England Patriots select running back from the University of Pittsburgh, Curtis Martin, the New Orleans.
I get a call, and it's Bill Parcells on the phone. And he says, hello, son, we just want to know if you would like to be a New England Patriot. I said, yes, sir, yes. As soon as I hung up the phone, I turned around and told her, I was just like, I realized I really don't want to play football. And my pastor, who was there, he said, well, Curtis, listen, all of those wonderful things you say you want to do for other people, maybe football is just that vehicle that God has given you to do those things. I just thought, like, I will at least be able to get my mother out of the hood and to buy her a car. That was my dream. It was literally that moment that football took on a whole different meaning.
Curtis Martin, touchdown.
Obviously a highly accomplished football player.
This is some clutch moves right here. Curtis Martin.
5 Pro Bowls, won a rushing title, and the 4th leading rusher in NFL history.
When I first got my signing bonus, I bought her a house, her car. I watched my mother be so bitter, and rightfully so. She had been through a lot, but she was hell-bent on never forgiving my father, never speaking to my father. My mother and I were riding through this part of town where I grew up, and we saw my father at a bus stop. I said, why don't we just give him a ride? I bet you he's going home. She said, there ain't no effing way he's getting in my mother effing car. My mother never really cussed me out like that. And I just said, Mom, you know what? I said, this man has been ruining your life since I was 5 years old, and you still feel the exact same way. And to be honest with you, you're just ruining your life. You know, my mother, she just got quiet. Light turned green. She starts to pull off. And then she pulls over. She rolls down the window, asks my father if he needs a ride. He gets in.
And we rode his dad home. When he got out of my car, something just like touched me in my heart.
My mother turns around and just starts bawling. It makes me emotional because I never saw my mother cry like that. So I gave her a hug. After I finished hugging her, I started wiping the tears from her eyes. She said, Kurt, I feel like I just dropped off a whole big bag of bricks. And Mom, I thank you so much for the sacrifices that you've made for me. I'm so grateful to my mother. That is the strongest individual that I've ever known. My mother was dealing with so much hurt and pain. And even through that, my mother stayed strong and raised me. My life is so amazing. I consider it not amazing because of where I am. I consider it amazing even as I went through some of those things. When I started coming out of it, I was able to see that there was a better future out there for me.
Coming from where I come from, I never even thought there was a chance for me to be the man that I am today.
You know, I always thought I would die before I was 21. With every little bit of progress that I made in life, it made me that much more grateful for life.
I realized that I had the ability to define myself, regardless of what I come from. I wouldn't trade one day of it because I really appreciate the man that I am today. Your circumstances, your situations, they don't have to define you.
If you can keep your problems in perspective and keep life in perspective, you can learn from the most difficult situations.
What if you're running away from your greatest opportunity?